Hello, all you beautiful people in the internet, everywhere where you get this signal. I don't know what day it is where you are, but here it's Sunday, and I don't know what time of day it is for you where you are, but here the sun is setting, and that means that it is Sunday after dark here on the line. Welcome. I am Paul from Paulogia, and with me tonight is Owen Morgan. Welcome, Owen.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here. I'm hoping we're going to have an interesting show. We already got some callers lined up, so that'll be good.
We uh, we haven't been on together in a while, so I was very excited to see this on the schedule. Just checking in. I'm assuming you still believe in zero gods. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes, so far. There's some witty retort that I could come up with, but I'm not that quick on my feet. Yeah, I don't think you and I have worked together in, God, years. I don't, it's been
It's
years.
been
Crazy.
yeah. I think probably not since I moved out east. Probably, but we used to do stuff back in the day, and we're both neither of us are believers, but we are open to being wrong about that. I frankly would be excited to be wrong and to become definitively shown that there is a God or gods out there that wants to have a relationship with us that is falsifiable. And so if you are sitting at home saying, "Well, I know that God exists, or gods, or however many you think there are, and these two fine gentlemen are going to burn in some sort of terrible afterlife and or just be snuffed out, tonight is your chance to save us. So we are here for your help. Give us a call, and and we will be prioritizing, as always, theist callers, but we will also, if there's a chance, we'll probably take a few calls from non-theists as well. But we are the late night crew. We are the cleanup team. This is the end of the Great Line day. So if you've been sitting there thinking, "Man, I need to call in," this is your chance. That sounds like I am trying to raise money for something. I am not. We're not trying to raise money. Uh, Owen, before we get into it, what has been happening on your channel this last week and or coming up this next week that you think people should know about?
Yeah, I've been talking a lot about Jehovah's Witnesses. There was a point in time where I wanted my channel to be about cults. I wanted to focus on that heavily. And then I noticed that, um, there's like a full blown real cult forming behind Donald Trump, or formed at this point. So I started gravitating toward that on my channel, but I decided to relegate that to my Fireside channel, and I've made it basically exclusively about religion, religious cults specifically, not political cults lately. That's what I've been doing, basically moving my main channel back to that. So, what
Awesome.
about you? What have you been
Awesome.
up to?
Mainly, man, I was almost ready to jump on the Jordan Peterson bandwagon this week. I'm glad I didn't, because so many other YouTubers jumped on that bandwagon, and covered it much more better than I. I'm more of a New Testament studies, Old Testament studies guy, versus the philosophy. So no, so my last video was actually Dr. Gary Habermas, who has his Resurrection 4-volume, 4,000-page opus. He specifically called me out by non-name. He kept calling me out, but I was the me shall who shall not be named. So I'm having a feud with a Bible scholar. That's
Oh
really
my God,
that's really
that's
what's
funny.
happening over at my channel. Yeah, but so yeah, so if anyone wants to specifically talk about, so I've been debating recently martyrdom of the apostles, resurrection of Jesus, that kind of thing. If you think I'm wrong about any of that stuff, give me a call. I'm here and want to hear about it. Let's start with one of the calls that we've got before we'll do some more announcements later in the show, because the line is your place to be for all kinds of shows like this, on several different topics. But let us start with our first caller, who has questions for each of us. So I hope we're both ready. We have Nathan. He is an atheist.
Hello.
And Nathan, you have questions for each of us. Am I correct about that?
Yes. Yes.
What what's your question for Owen?
For Owen, I myself grew up in a denomination that was a little outside the mainstream. Like we didn't believe in the Trinity, and if I recall being told correctly, one of our original either translations that we did or something like statements like a fully fledged statement of belief or whatever we had shared with the
Confession,
Jehovah's
maybe?
Witnesses at some point. I don't remember.
I
I
assume.
apologize.
I assume. No, you're fine. I think you're probably referring to like a confession, right? Like your statement of belief or whatever.
Possibly. I don't. It's been so long ago, and it was told to me in passing. I don't remember what it actually was.
Okay.
Anyway, my question
Nathan, I'm
is.
sorry to interrupt. Nathan, you're just a little bit quiet. Can you?
No, you're
I don't
good.
know if you can be a little bit. You can be a little bit closer to your mic. That would be great.
I'm on my earbuds. Let me take those out. Hello.
Oh,
Hey,
much better.
Yeah, that sounds
Much
pretty
better.
good.
Okay.
So
Um,
you're good. So you were saying that you're from a denomination that didn't believe in traditional things that most of Protestant Christianity accepts today, right? Like the Trinity?
correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with you being a Jehovah's Witness, I was just wondering what you like, how you see your escape, if being on the fringe made it easier or harder for you.
Mm. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about it, but I would say it was probably easier being on the fringe because it's so different from every other Christian out there that I could say to a lot of people that I was in like a very unusual extreme religion, and they'd say, "Oh, what is it?" And I would tell them like Jehovah's Witnesses, and we believed all these crazy things, and they would say, "Wow, that is crazy." But if I had just said, if I'd believed in the Trinity and I believed in all the other traditional Christian stuff, and the problem was really just the behavior, it would have been a little bit harder for people to kind of understand where I came from. I would say that's probably how I feel about it.
Gotcha.
So,
Do you
what
feel?
was the religion that you came from? Like, do you know the name of the
Yeah.
denomination or whatever?
The Church of God of Abrahamic Faith was our name. You can look it up. It's the coggc.org. They're located in oh shoot, it was Atlanta, Georgia, and they moved. And I always forget the name of the new town.
It looks like the website is really nice. It looks like it's a reasonably big church. Is that right? Or
Kind of, sort of, not really. Like we're
oh, they're just
decently
lying to us.
sized, but it's more so just scattered across the country. Like there's a handful of churches in every state.
Right. So
Well, I
they're
mean
just
not every state, but I mean it's scattered.
yeah. So they're just lying to us. That checks out. I can see that. Anyway, very interesting. Yeah. I mean, is there anything else that you want to mention about the church?
No, not really. I just because looking back on myself and coming out, over the past few years, I'm not even sure of my own answer. I mean, I think my go-to answer is being on the fringe made it easier because I was used to questioning other things and used to not thinking anything else was right. But then on the other hand, you've got that us versus them mentality built in. So
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And as far as coming out of the religion and my own mental state goes, I would say that I agree with you that it was probably a little bit easier being on the fringes. Jehovah's Witnesses taught me that Catholicism is ridiculous, and Pentecostalism is ridiculous, and they came up with very convincing biblical answers. So when I realized, oh, these people are full of it too, it was that much easier to just kind of walk away.
yeah,
Anyway, you got anything else for us?
yeah. Question for Paul. I've been waiting for you to host because I thought
Yeah.
of this a couple months ago. Obviously, I'm not making a case for the Bible. This is just a hypothetical. If tomorrow some archaeologists found the original manuscripts, would we be able to prove that they were in fact the originals? Like, I know dating can only get us so far. Textual criticism is a thing, but would that be good enough? Are there other methods that I'm not aware of that you think could get us to prove that these indeed are the first ones?
I assume you're talking about New Testament at this point?
Well, I mean, either one, but sure.
Yeah, Old Testament would be... Old Testament would be even more tricky because there isn't great consensus about... Well, first of all, the Bible is, of course, 66 books if you're Protestant, more books if you're other denominations.
Right.
But if you pick any given book, like if you say Daniel, well, some people think Daniel was written around 200 BC. Scholars think it was written around 200 BC, and other scholars think it was written, evangelicals think it was written 1600 BC, right? So dating in the Old Testament is you can get more weird because it could absolutely date to 200 BC. Maybe that is when it was written, but you'd get a lot of pushback on that. So New Testament would be easier on that front because at least there's a range of dates that people kind of agree to, right? Like no one thinks the Gospels were written before 40 CE, and the oldest date for Luke and John is in the 2nd century, right? So there's at least there's an 80-year window that you could use dating to figure out. Do you recall a few years back someone claimed that they actually had a 1st century manuscript of Mark? Do you recall
no,
that?
I didn't hear that.
So a particular scholar, I'm not going to get into the mudslinging. It got into a lot of scholar versus scholar fight, but someone actually had claimed prematurely that they had a 1st century copy of Mark, which would have been very exciting. But it turns out was not for a lot of reasons. Dating the material would absolutely be the primary thing. Dating of the material and the ink. The other problem, though, would be that some of this composition was actually done. They would actually scrub off old. If you didn't have money but you were literate, you actually might scrub off and scrape off the ink of another piece of parchment because it was expensive. So you never know. Like
right.
if the story held that it was a disciple wrote it, they may well have easily wrote it on top of something else. So dating. Again, I think your intuition there is good. What you would need to, probably the telltale sign that they would go to is the type of what they call form criticism. I think that's what they're calling, where you're literally looking at things like margins and you're looking at the layout of the page and that kind of thing. What you'd want to find is no evidence of scribal stuff, right? So that when you're copying a document, it's easy to line everything up. Oh, I'm making a copy, so I'm going to square up. They tended to square up the left and right margins, for example, that kind of thing. When you're composing, you're probably not going to be doing that. So they would probably be looking for signs of in the literal writing, in like hesitation and maybe scratching out, right? Because in the current ones, no one scratches anything out. But you can imagine if you were writing a long gospel like the Gospel of Matthew, you might make a mistake here along the way, like on page number 9. So there are things that I think that you'd be able to pitch. You'd also have to pitch that your copy had all the agreed upon, none of the stuff that was deemed to be a later variation, probably. Although then it would probably create a bunch of fights. I don't know. What did you have any ideas? The only thing I can think of is this compositional hesitation that you would have when you handwrite a letter to your. I don't know if you are old enough to be handwriting letters to your grandma or something like that, but when you don't, or handwriting, or if even in class, if you have to handwrite an essay versus if you're typing it out, right? You're just not composing as cleanly. That's the only thing I can think of.
Right,
did you have any other ideas, Nathan?
No, that was it. And you brought up some stuff I hadn't thought about before, so appreciate it.
All right. Well, but it would be very exciting to find something. I don't think we could ever definitively say that it was the original. I am now, the only other note I'm making is there's a couple letters of Paul where he allegedly uses. He actually says he even uses a scribe, and he says, see in what large letters I sign my name," which is a weird thing in your print Bible, right? When you read the verse, "See what letters I use,
Yeah.
large letters I use to print my name." You'd at least want the scribe to have, when he did those letters, you'd want in the original, you'd at least want to see some big letters on that particular
Right.
verse, right? Because he's saying.
Right. Although at the same time, that.
Go ahead.
Did we lose him?
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I was gonna say at the same time, because you mentioning that reminds me, and I've had this thought when I've heard you talk about that before. Is that's one of the books that they do think Paul wrote, correct?
So I need to remind myself of which. I believe he does that in one of the non-disputed and one of the disputed, because they of course, the non-disputed like to lift things, or sorry, the disputed like to lift things from the disputed, because a good forgery is going to lift things from that. Do you have a point on? Like, I'm going to look it up here.
Do I have a point?
Because, like, I mean, let's say that both of them are forgeries. I could totally see it. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, it's totally me writing this, you know.
Right. It's in. I guess I'm sorry. I am thinking. Yeah, it's in Galatians 6, and Galatians is one of the non-disputed letters. So yeah. So yeah, you'd at least want to see. You'd at least want to see on that verse. You'd want to see both letter size change, but also a notable handwriting, stylistic difference. But
yeah.
But that's the only thing I can think of where the text references its own formation. But a great question. But yeah, I think we'd be stuck. We would never have the original. And of course, apologists like to say, well, if we only had an original, people would worship that, and that's why God can't let us have it, because then people would
Never heard that one
venerate
before, but that checks out.
would venerate that text like they do the Shroud of Turin and things like that. But anyway, thank you so much, Nathan. Did you have any last thoughts before we let you go?
No, it's just great talking to you guys. I work in a food factory, so I download YouTube all the time. I listen to you guys a lot, so appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for calling.
Have a good night.
Thanks. Boy. You too. Boy.
Yeah, that's a super interesting question. You can hear me, right? Just want to make sure that sometimes there's a little bit of lag. Okay. Yeah, super interesting question. I actually studied the New Testament and which ones Paul wrote, and a whole bunch of that other stuff too. Isn't a large section of like the words of Jesus, isn't that just like copied right over from certain gospels? So
yeah, you're absolutely right. Matthew copies most of Matthew, and Luke both copy most of Mark. And a lot of sections it's word for word, but they importantly make changes here and there, right? So it's actually, you pay attention to, why did you change that word? Why was Jesus in suffering agony in Mark, and in Luke he's like having a day at the beach? It's just like you change that one word to make things. So sorry, I'm just affirming your point. What were you gonna?
No, yeah, you're good. I think it's really fascinating, and on top of that, I believe that. I think Jesus likely spoke Aramaic, right? And then it was translated like to Greek, and God, it's just ridiculous, the whole thing. By the way, just a note, I should have mentioned before, I wrote a book about World War II, religion in World War II. It's called Was Hitler an Atheist? And I did just an obscene amount of research for it. So if anybody has a question about World War II or how it went, or the culture back then, and the church and how Hitler worked with it and tried to co-opt it and everything, I've got the answers to that.
Do you have a one-word answer to that question?
Was he an atheist?
Yeah.
The short answer is he was not an atheist, but he was very hostile toward both the Protestant and Catholic churches because he wanted to take control of them. I think he's more cynical, but he was a Christian, in my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of scholars.
Gotcha. Well, that's a hot take. So we will. I actually am going to look to add that book to my own cart. So I'm excited about that. Before we move on to the next call, we still have plenty of room for theist callers to call on in. So we don't want to just be all friendly tonight. We want to. Apparently, Matt on the earlier show was genteel, practically genteel. So we need to get some hostility up in here, or at least some vocal conversations. But tonight's Sunday. It's a big night. It's a double show on the line, but we have shows throughout the week. On Monday with for Skeptalk, we have John Gleason and Aaron Adair. On Tuesday for Chewed Gum, we have Arden and Alyssa. And on Wednesday, we have the Hang Up, as always, with Matt Dillahunty and a guest TBD. And on TC on the Transatlantic Call-In Show on Thursday, our hosts will be our producer Arden as well as Alexander. So we have a lot of stuff going on, and of course next Sunday, refresh again. There'll be other new hosts, but tonight is already Sunday. You don't need to think about next Sunday. Tonight's the night you need to call in and convert us. But while we have calls to get to, let's get to Voss. Did I do the button right? They don't normally let me drive, so this is pretty good. So,
hello,
Voss.
Yes.
You have questions. Yes. You have questions about your religious family trying to bring you back to the faith and ways to deal with it. Well, we both have some familiarity with that. So, but what are you thinking? What's happening in your world?
So I'm a little bit familiar with you because I've seen several of your videos. Thoroughly enjoyed your what did you call it? I think it was like the seminar on that huge religious meeting they did. What was it, like 2 years ago? I enjoyed that. I'm not super familiar with you, Owen, but I've heard a little bit about it a minute ago. You were a Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah, I used to be a Jehovah's Witness.
As to how that was, but in this case, with my family, my mom, super religious Catholic, my brother, super religious Catholic, and my dad is a little bit Jewish. So we had a bit of a diverse religious company for, I guess, almost my whole life. But the thing is like, I'm not convinced, so I'm an atheist. In fact, after watching, I don't know if you guys are very familiar with Vice Rhino's video on the proof of not God, I found that compelling enough for me to agree with him that I can definitely say I believe that the Christian God does not exist. However, my parents are basically treating it like a phase. Oh, he'll grow out of it. It'll be a matter of time. And at one point, my dad, who was in the military, brought out the, what is it, No Atheist in Foxholes. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that, but it's...
Oh, yeah.
Indeed.
I don't know. I'm not very good at explaining myself. It's like, what is a way I can deal with that? Because it's not like they're great, except that. You know what I'm saying?
First,
like
I'd just like to clarify:
go ahead.
Are you currently financially dependent on your family, or are you independent of your family financially?
A little bit of both. I'm independent enough to where I have people I could move out with, but it would put a large financial strain on all of us until we could take ourselves out of it.
Okay. It just, as you can imagine, that does sort of temper what an answer or some advice might be, right? So,
yeah.
What is the nature of what is causing you the stress? Is it jabs? Is it like random jabs, or is it more than that? Like, and verbal? I'm assuming these are verbal jabs. Not
kind of. It they treat it like I'm just someone immature, but every time I try and go like, no, this is something I've thought about, they treat it like, oh, it's just a phase. So every time I try and broach it, it's like, it's not a phase, mom. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was wondering if there was another way for me to explain it without it coming off as just some teenager going, it's not a phase, mom.
Are they allowing you to live your life though? Like other than the jabs, are they allowing you to basically go about your atheist business on a day-to-day basis?
Oh yeah, like again, they're really accommodating, but it's just the slight, the little oh you'll be back in the faith at some point kind of thing. It's not often, but it happens enough where I was like, there's got to be a way for me to communicate this better or get them to stop.
Well, here, this would be my advice for you. I think if you're comfortable enough having the conversation and you don't worry that they might kick you out, I would probably personally approach it from the direction of um, she is an atheist toward like Thor and Zeus and Odin and everything else, but it's just this one god. Well, you've just gone one god further. It's a common way of kind of framing it, but that's one that tends to hit home with a lot of people in my experience. That one might work for you. Just make sure, of course, that you're not putting yourself in a bad situation that could end with you like losing everything. I wouldn't want that.
That's fair. I hadn't really thought of that one.
Yeah, it's a really good. It's a really good way of kind of framing it in a way that a lot of people can accept without feeling like they're being attacked by you or whatever for their faith. Because once you start criticizing or attacking, people tend to shut down instead of listening. They want to kind of back themselves into this corner and fortify their existing beliefs. So I try to keep their guard down as much as possible and be non-confrontational when I have these conversations and frame it in a way that they could relate. That's how I do it.
Okay. That seems like a more gentle approach because it keeps ending up with me feeling frustrated and them not getting the point so far. So that seems to be a more, I guess, as you said, gentle approach to it.
Yeah, like when people get frustrated, when tension gets high in the conversation, everybody is now locked into their beliefs that they had when it started, pretty much. So if I'm feeling frustrated, I take it as a sign that the other person has just stopped listening completely, more than likely. So, yeah. Do you have any other questions for us?
Well, I was just going to mention that I actually still have this very similar circumstance in my family where there are family members who absolutely think that this is a phase for me as well. I'm coming on 8 years or whatever it is, something like that. And so what I'm hearing in your voice, and I'm just going to, I realize I'm projecting my own situation onto yours. So correct me if these are not hitting the mark exactly, but there's two separate goals possibly, right? I think what we would all love is for the people who love us and whom we love most to actually understand us, to actually know what we're thinking, and so that we can feel like they get it. But that is a long-term goal. Unfortunately, that's a long-term goal as opposed to a short-term goal. There's also the short-term goal potentially of just leave me alone for for a while, right? The first one is will they ever respect you, and then the second one is, well, can we just coexist in peace? On the second piece, if you just want to coexist in peace, what I've had some modest success with in the people in my life who treated me this and continue to treat me the same way is to convince them that family members rarely convert or deconvert fellow family members, right? Like that's, you can look up the stats on that. It's super unlikely that other than the indoctrination as a child, an adult late in life is unlikely to have their mind changed on almost anything by their parents or, or by their children. It's just a thing that rarely happens. And so I was able to convince my family that, well, you know what you will need here is for the Holy Spirit or someone else, for God to send someone else along. Like you are unlike, I'm using these names as proxies, but mom, dad, sibling, cousins, you are unlikely to be the vessel that debates me out of this. So the main thing they can agree on is that if anything's going to save me, it's the Holy Spirit, and that what they need to spend that energy on praying for me versus arguing with me, and setting some boundaries around, well, you know what? I'm not trying to deconvert you. You're not trying to convert me. This relationship is important enough that we will both trust that in the grand scheme of the universe that that it will trend toward the norm, and one of us either will die disagreeing or one of us will come back to the other position to the other, but that this isn't the space where it's going to happen, and to be able basically to call a truce on the debates, and mainly by appealing to that their books, if they're Christians, at least, and Catholics. I know Catholics value the book a little less, but that the book says it's the Holy Spirit that's going to win me back, if anything. So let's just focus on what we have in common and do that. That does not solve the long-term respect part, but it is a band-aid for the short-term dealing. Does that sound like something that in your family dynamic might have a chance of working?
Yeah, it does. It's never gotten into a full-blown debate because they generally just almost hand-wave dismiss it as, oh, he'll be back, it'll be fine. With everyone else, my friends are a little bit like that too, because many of my friends are also theists, but at this point it's just like we don't talk about it so we don't have to deal with it, because we normally do D&D.
Right.
We're talking about fictional deities as opposed to not fictional deities. Anyway,
Yeah,
with
I get you.
my family, that was the biggest concern I had. So that pretty well answered it. You asked if I had
mean,
one
you
more
can also.
question.
I was just gonna
Oh,
one
go
last
ahead.
thing on that. You can also just lean into the joke, right? Just become part of it. You're kind of like if you're comfortable, you can just acknowledge, hey, yeah, God must really have something big in mind for me, where I need to build my testimony right now to, you better leave me alone, because God wants me to have this season of doubt. God wants me to have this understanding of atheists, so that when He does bring me back, right, I can definitely be the voice to the atheists, right? So if I sometimes will just lean into that joke. Yeah, I am where God wants me to be right now, and when He brings me back, hey, we'll all party about it. But for now, this is where God wants me to be living in sin here, and be the ignorant fool. If you're comfortable with buddies and friends in those kind of situations, sometimes leaning into the joke makes it not as much fun for them to poke at you.
That would be kind of funny, because
Yeah,
apparently
and
I can do a
it,
relatively decent pastor voice. You know the one I'm talking
Yeah,
about, the preacher at the pulpit. So that might be some way of entertaining
and
myself with everybody else.
this may also be your parents' way of dealing with the fact that you don't believe. For better or worse, it really tears people up when their kids don't believe the same way as them or do the same things or whatever, for whatever reason it is. Uh, I guess you might say like they're mourning like the son they lost and gaining an adult or something like that. Or that's probably how they would frame it or how they'd say it. So may just be their way of kind of dealing with it. And if that's the case, then I think Paul's method is like a really good way to handle it.
Well, I'll definitely take that into consideration. One tongue-in-cheek question for you both right before I go. I heard you guys mention that Jordan Peterson debate a minute ago. Any quick thoughts on his incredible Matrix-level dodging skills?
Yeah, I have some thoughts. You want to go, Paul?
No, you start.
Okay, yeah, I think that it was basically one gigantic Mott and Bailey. He started from a position of like extremeness, and he backed up until he literally could not back up anymore because he was claiming not to be a Christian even by the end of it. And I understand that Jubilee had to change the name of the YouTube video from Christian Debates 20 Atheists to Jordan Peterson Debates 20 Atheists. Like, how does he not know that he's lost at that point? I don't know. What do you think, Paul?
Well, I think that for me, the telltale sign is that I've watched maybe 20 response videos to this thing, and only one of them is defending him, including what I've mostly watched are the Christian responses to this, right? The Christians are aghast that this is somewhat the way people were arguing for Christianity and theism. So I think when both sides unite on this guy did a terrible job, then basically, I think all that he did was undermine his Daily Wire level of credibility that he has left. As soon as you're trying to argue over what does the word believe mean, and that I'm on one Christian versus 20 atheists, but I don't have to tell you if I'm a Christian, which is a sentence he said. I don't have to tell you if I am. I don't know. I feel like when both sides agree, you lost.
That video is where someone defended him. Hold up, someone defended that?
So there's a Catholic YouTuber whose initials are CC, and
Chris from Westchester County.
No, his Capturing Christianity was defending defending him. But I feel like even the defense even was a bit of a clickbait title to differentiate his take on it. But other than that, no, I don't know. It's the hotness of the internet this week, but only because I think such a prominent person was so embarrassed by 20 people who are younger than his children, right? So,
God, he only needed to go first and been embarrassed by that. But the funny thing is, I used to actually watch Jordan and think some of his advice was correct, but like the longer I listened to him, the more it seems like his intellectual talking points have slowly just trended downward. I don't know if that's how anybody else feels, but I just can't take it seriously anymore.
It's a classic thing that happens when people get a giant platform and they're invited to speak outside of their primary field of expertise. I think that's just a natural thing that happens. I find myself doing it sometimes. Sometimes I find myself overstating biology, for example, sometimes, or at least maybe not being great at it. When he was talking about pure psychology at the start, I feel like he was closer to being bang on more often than now that his daily, no pun intended, his daily job is, right, speaking about politics. But it's not what he's trained in, shall we say. And so I think that's a danger for all of us. Not that you need to be an expert to speak on things. Obviously, neither Owen or I have a PhD in anything related. We just have life experience. So anyway, that's probably enough banter about a different video. Thank you so much for the call, and I hope that helps. Also, but I would invite you very much to give it a couple months and actually call in, give us a report how it went, see if any of that stuff was more effective than not, because this is we get we get this question often enough that I know that there's a lot of people listening dealing with this kind of thing, and rather than just hearing what Owen and I have to say about it, it'd be great to hear someone call back and say this worked or this didn't work. So please do.
All right. Well, I'll definitely keep an
Thanks,
ear out
Voss.
next time you two are both on. Thank you, guys. I
Yeah,
appreciate
absolutely.
you.
All right. Thanks. Although we have so many
Awesome.
great hosts on the line that any given combination of views is, it's like the fine tuning of the universe. The probability of any two hosts at any given time is always
Right.
negligible.
Yeah.
We actually have a theist caller. Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to cut you off. Did you have any further thoughts about that last call?
No, you're good. I was going to move on to the theist caller. That was a very interesting phone call, but it's also going to be very interesting to hear from the theist caller who we just brought in, right?
Absolutely. Hi, Stevie.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Can you hear?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
We can.
Can I call you Paul, or what's the best way to?
Yeah, Paul and Owen, I think is great.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I was just giving you guys a call because I heard y'all talking about the Bible earlier, and I kind of disagreed with some of the stuff you talked about, and you said you wanted to get some back and forth going. So
I
figured I'd give
absolutely
you guys
do.
a call.
Sure.
Yeah, so like
Where do you want to
one of
start?
the things one of the things I heard was like, y'all were talking about how the Bible was translated into Aramaic. I mean, from Aramaic into Greek. Obviously, Jesus more than likely spoke Aramaic. But I just think there's important context that was missing there. That whole area had been controlled by Rome for 90 years at the time that Jesus had his ministry. So pretty much every civil aspect of life was done in Greek. You pay your taxes in Greek.
What
the signage is in Greek.
Where do you know that from?
Just the research I've done, and you can look and see like who controlled. If you just Google how long did Rome, what years did Rome control that area, and you can
but there's lots of there's lots of first century Jewish scholars who are not even Christian, right? There's like Jody Magnus, for example. There's lots of other Paula Fredrickson, lots of other like people who spend their whole lives studying this area and that time period, who would disagree that by and large that the Jews in the area en masse spoke Greek, right? Like they would know enough words to get by, much like the average Western Canadian like myself. I can speak a little French, but that's not the same as being able to write a book in French.
Yeah, so like I think you make a good point because I agree with you actually. Yeah, you're right. Not everybody would have known Greek fluently or anything, but pretty much everybody every adult would have been familiar with the language, and certainly like Matthew, for example, as a tax collector, would have known Greek like like the back of his hand. I think also Luke, who was a doctor as well.
Okay, so I don't actually accept that either of those things are true, but I don't think that Luke wrote Luke, and I don't think Matthew wrote Matthew. We're a little bit all over the map at the moment. Let me start with the Aramaic, if you don't mind. We can start with the Aramaic. So, do you dispute that Jesus and his disciples, in their itinerant preacher to lower class Galilee, as depicted in the Gospels, that they would have done the majority of their teaching in Aramaic?
Yeah, they would have done the majority. I believe that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Owen's point, and Owen can correct me if I'm speaking for him. I don't mean to, but I kind of want to spit this out. That Owen's point was that wouldn't it be weird if three people translated what Jesus said in Aramaic identically, right? Like, so if I heard a bank robbery and someone, the bank robber was speaking Spanish, and I knew enough Spanish to understand it, and the other two people beside me also knew enough Spanish to understand it, wouldn't it be weird if the three of us translated the phrase identically? Like, wouldn't that be weird?
Word for word, yeah.
I mean, I think it depends on what words are being said, but yeah, I mean,
Well, but let's
that
say
might
it's a
be
whole
true, yeah.
sermon, right? Like, because Jesus,
Yeah.
this isn't like just saying, "Hey, get out." Jesus was doing whole parables, like the parables of lost sheep. It doesn't seem like
Right.
a thing that three different people are going to translate word for word in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
Like, so
I think
we're not
if
saying
you
it's
translate,
problematic that it was. We're not saying it's problematic that it got translated. What we're saying is, isn't it weird that if these were independent witnesses, that they all three translated it identically?
I don't think that's weird because when Jesus is speaking, maybe he's just talking, or they're covering certain events, or maybe a conversation that he had, versus a parable, or the Sermon on the Mount or whatever. They're going to want to be very precise. So it
Okay.
doesn't
Well,
that doesn't
let
ring
me
a bell
just
to me, as
let
an
me
alarm
ask
or
you
anything.
this regarding the whole thing. If you were sitting there listening to somebody speak for an hour in English, and you speak English, and another person is in the room listening to the same exact thing, what do you think the chances are that both of you afterward would write down in a different language the exact same words? The chance is zero, practically as zero as it can be. And the reason I say that is because studies have been done on this. There are specifically, there was a study where a professor walks in and he says something, and at the end of the class, he asks everybody to write it down without warning them that they were going to need to. And then in the next class, he says something and then tells them to write it down. And in both cases, none of them wrote it down identically. Especially like the longer it gets, it is a fiction to think that that could possibly happen. Again, that doesn't disprove anything by itself. I
No.
think this is just like a fact, right? I don't know why anybody would be disputing. It's just a fact. Does anybody dispute this in the Christian world, Paul?
Well, I think Stevie is perhaps. I was going to follow up. Do you accept that Matthew, the author of Matthew and the author of Luke, was copying sections? They had a copy of Mark right in front of them, and they were using it for reference to copy from. Do you accept that that's a thing?
Well, there are a couple things there. So, like, number one, like if I'm being taught at a university or a college or something like that, and the teacher's speaking, I'm going to take notes. You got to remember, there's 12 apostles. At least John and Matthew. There's a very good chance that they were taking notes at the time that they were speaking. After they got done taking notes, in the evening, they probably would have met and compared notes. And so, like, that's just, I think that's a kind of a weak argument, to be honest with you. Now,
But no.
can you restate your question, Paul?
Yeah. So, do you accept what scholars accept, what they call the synoptic problem, that the author of Matthew and the author of Luke had a copy of Mark in front of them they copied from when they were writing their Gospels? Do you accept that is the way it happened?
No, I mean, they're not carbon copies of Mark.
No, they're not carbon copies. That is, as we expressed earlier, it's more interesting to see the few words they changed. But there are giant sentences, right, that are word for word, even in the West Huff sense, word for word, identical.
I
So,
mean,
are you denying that the author of Mark and the author of John? No, I can't get this one. Are you denying that the author of Matthew and the author of Luke used Mark as a source? Do you think that they didn't have Mark as a source?
I don't. I mean, it's possible, but I don't think there's enough evidence to conclude that. Absolutely.
Okay. Are you aware that you're vastly against virtually all Bible scholarship, even including most evangelical circles? Absolutely. Are you just aware that you'd be going against scholarly consensus on that?
Well, what I was going to say is, like, I mean, that's how I see it. I mean, did they use some of it? It's possible. Let me ask you this. I mean, if they did use some of Mark, does that invalidate?
No, it doesn't. It invalidates absolutely nothing.
Mark, would that,
except
that
for
wouldn't really
what
prove anything.
What Owen established sooner is what you have then is what they call collusion, right? In the modern, like if you have testimony in court or if you have witnesses at a crime scene, they segregate them so that they can't get their stories straight. So you can't collude. So given the what's obvious to virtually anyone who studies this stuff is that Matthew and Luke had a copy of Mark open, so you can't call any of the stories that they doubled up on independent attestation. That's all. That's all he gets you, which tells you nothing ultimately. But you just don't have three witnesses for those stories. Does it bother you?
Think that it.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say I don't think it discredits them at all. I mean, if you were writing a documentary on the Titanic sinking, and I was writing the same documentary on the Titanic sinking, there's going to be witnesses that overlap that maybe we both speak to. Like we both might reference, and even let's just say. Can I finish real quick? Let's just say you wrote your documentary first, and in your documentary you interviewed a witness and you wrote down what the witness said, and then I cite that witness or whatever. It doesn't make it any less credible. So I really don't think it's a strong argument.
It doesn't. But you would agree that it makes it not independent attestation, right?
Well, I mean, I don't know that I would agree with that. I mean, I think.
How can it be independent attestation if we both talk to the same witness?
Well, you can't apply. You can't. I think it's fallacious to apply one chapter or one sermon or one thing, and then turn around and say this was done for the whole thing. I think.
No, but you heard me. Did you hear me say that we're talking about for the stories that are duplicated, right? Only for the stories that are duplicated does this matter. You'd agree with me on that, I hope.
I mean, I don't know all the specifics on it, but yeah, I mean, let's just say they are duplicated. Yeah, sure, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, so all that it tells you is that they're not independent. Absolutely, it could from the most reliable witness in the world. Absolutely, but if Channel 5 News and Channel 8 News both interview the same witness, they still have the same source. Like it's not an independent attestation. That's all we're saying. So I now want to go to. You said that you're pretty sure that John, I assume you think that John, son of Zebedee, wrote the Gospel of John?
Yes.
So when Acts 4:13 says that now when they saw the boldness of Peter and John, they perceived that they were uneducated and untrained men. And this is in the book of Acts. And the untrained in the Greek there means unlettered. That means they don't know how to write. So Acts 4 says that John didn't know how to write, but you're telling me that John was taking notes. How do you square those two things?
You said Acts 4. What was the verse?
Acts 4:13.
Hold on one second. I'm reading it right now.
Acts 4:13. I'm not actually familiar with that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Yeah, the translation I have says that they could see that they were ordinary men with no special training in the scriptures.
Yeah, that's
what
translation. So I hang out with Greek scholars. No, I'm not. This isn't like I have no credentials of my own, but people I know who speak Greek well say that the best translation of these are unlettered. They're uneducated. They don't know how to write. I know that your translation softened that a bit because this is a big problem. But how do you? So you're going to square this by saying, well, you prefer your English translation, which doesn't say unschooled and untrained in letters, even though other translations do say that. I'm just curious.
Well, it says, I mean, I'm reading the KJV now, and it says that they were perceived that they were unlearned and ignorant men. They marveled. So, and that's the KJV. So, I think you're adding to the text a little bit here.
So
but let's just say you're right.
Yeah.
If I use a scribe to write something, I mean, does that mean I didn't write it?
No, but that's not what I'm saying. You said that John was taking notes.
I said that John is the author of John. I think that John,
You-
maybe John took notes. Maybe he took notes in Aramaic. He may not have taken notes right there and then in Greek. You know what I'm saying? So that he may have taken notes in Aramaic and used a scribe to help him write the Greek, because they knew that the Greek language is the common language, and it would have got the word out the fastest. Going with
So I'm still baffled by this notion that you, okay. So you're basically King James is like just not a modern translation of Greek, right? Like it's they didn't have the best sources from the to create the King James Bible. They were very politically doing it. I would encourage you to at least have multiple translations when you do your Bible study, which is fine.
I do.
All right, so I think that the Bible says that John didn't know how to write, and that's a problem for me. So my last thing I want to ask you about, and then you can you're free to ask me more questions, is you said that Matthew wrote Matthew. Now in Matthew chapter 9, it tells the story of when Jesus met Matthew. You're familiar with that, I assume, in general sense.
Yeah, in general sense.
So that is one of the sections that is almost letter for letter, word for word, copied from Mark. So Matthew, when he's describing the day he met Jesus, didn't decide to use his own words for that, and in fact didn't even use the pronouns like I or me. He used the third person pronouns for this, and he decided to use the words of someone else for the day he met Jesus, and not just someone else who wasn't there, right? Because the gospel, according to you, I'm guessing you think that the author of Mark was someone who was Peter's later apprentice, right? Mark. And so Mark was not there. Mark never met Jesus. If you are writing a book about the day you met Jesus, would you copy it word for word from someone who wasn't there and not even use your own first person pronouns for it?
I just don't think that, I mean, first of all, let me just address it in order. So, like, going back to how you interpret the text or how you translate it, there's a lot of scholars that translate it different. So I just don't see that it just doesn't.
You're talking about Acts 4 now?
Argument. Yeah, I'm going back there and then we'll move on.
It's not a general argument used. I've never heard anyone spout the John was taking notes as they went theory before. So anyway.
No, I mean, I think it makes sense that they would, but anyways, yeah. So I mean, there's different scholars say different things. So, and then the second part of your question.
I'm sorry. Just 1 second. I will let you continue. But I don't know of any scholar that claims that the apostles were taking notes as they listened to Jesus. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It might be in the Chosen.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm just saying that, like, it makes sense that they might do that. I'm not saying. I mean, that would explain a lot.
You're not hanging your hat on it, nor is that. Yeah, so fair enough.
Okay.
But I'd love to hear about Matthew not using his own words to talk about meeting Jesus.
Again, I'm not super familiar with that particular. I'd have to read it, to dive deeper into it. But I just don't see how that invalidates. Like, how does that invalidate Mark at all? I mean, wouldn't
it doesn't invalidate Mark? It invalidates that the author of Matthew was indeed a disciple, right? Because Mark.
Which verse are we looking at? Do you know?
I think it's all Matthew chapter 9, if I'm remembering off the top of my head. But I could be wrong about that. Yeah, calling it Matthew 9:9, and then 9:9 to 12, and that's a duplicated story from I forget which chapter in Mark.
Okay, bear with me here. I'm pulling it up.
But I mean, what you need to do is you need to pull it up in Greek, right? So the version in Matthew and the version in Mark, pull them up in Greek, and you don't even have to understand the Greek to compare the words, right? Like they're the same.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like, I trust the scholars. Scholars put these translations together. So, I mean, I trust you trust the scholars when you talk about stuff too. So.
Oh, for sure. I'm not. I don't speak Greek, so I don't.
Me having to go to the Greek. I mean, there's scholars for that. So.
Well, no,
but yeah. I'm sorry, guys. I think I keep getting like a Discord notification, blowing my eardrum out. Is that me or is that you guys? Or
no, that's mine. You can hear that.
That's our
Yeah,
goose,
yeah. Okay.
That shouldn't be coming through. I'm so sorry.
Oh, don't sweat it. You're good. Anyway, I'm sorry. You guys can continue what you were saying.
I was just gonna say, oh yeah, the Matthew thing. Yeah, I mean, I just it's possible that he wrote it in like that third person view, or there could be maybe he used a scribe to help him in that particular situation. I mean, there's any number of things. I just don't think
sure,
the evidence
if
is
you want to
strong
go
enough
there, but like literally, Matthew tells no first person stories about Jesus, and it seems like if I was writing a gospel and I wanted to be lazy or just judicious, and Mark's already got one that I mostly agree with, so let's just copy from that. It just still seems to me like the day I meet Jesus, I'm going to have at least one word of personal anecdote about how that made me feel, and not copy someone's story who wasn't there. So these are all reasons for me why you came in saying that Matthew wrote Matthew and John wrote John. Now you've backed it off even and said, well, maybe scribes wrote them, or I'm guessing maybe you're in the camp that maybe these are communities of writers that came out of the Johannine community and the Matthean community. I mean, those are reasons why I don't buy it.
If a scribe writes it, though, it's the same thing as him writing it. I mean, if I dictate to my scribe to write something,
that's fair, but it still doesn't solve the problem that you told your scribe, don't write down my version of the story, copy it from Mark who wasn't here. A scribe doesn't solve that problem.
I think it's an assumption to say that it was copied. I mean, I still think that's an assumption. I don't think you have the proof or evidence for that to really support that. I think so far what you've pointed to is coincidence.
So you don't trust the scholars, right? So you don't, because the scholarship is absolutely that Mark came first, and that Luke and Matthew used it as a source, not the exclusive source. They may have been eyewitnesses. That doesn't matter, but they at least, the stories that they copied, and you aren't trusting the scholarship on that.
Well, there's scholarship that says the opposite. I mean, there's a lot of debate about.
I mean, there is scholarship. There is also scholarship that the Earth is flat, and there is scholarship that vaccines don't do anything. Like this, yes. I mean, you name the position.
Let me ask you this. I mean, you're saying you trust these scholars, so I mean, do you trust them all the way, or do you only trust them when it's convenient? You know what I'm saying? Like you can't trust these scholars.
Neither. In fact, there's no scholar that I trust on everything they say. I like to go back and research. This is why I kind of know roughly, these things, because I actually want to know how they got to their conclusion, not what is the bean count on. Okay, well, we interviewed 100 scholars and 80 said this and 20 said that, so that's what I'm going to go with. I try and go back. So when I heard you say, well, there's no point in going back to the Greek, that was kind of like, well, what? Because the claim is that in Greek they copied word for word, and so even though I don't understand Greek, I can pull up the manuscripts and say, well, that letter is the same as that letter is the same as that letter, and I do that checking for myself.
I didn't say there's no point in going back to the Greek. I'm saying we have scholars that have done the work for us, and just like you trust scholars in your field of study or in your line of work, I trust the scholars in translation, scholarship. So, do I trust every single scholar I've ever read? No, probably not. Just like you don't either. And some scholars conflict with each other. And so, I mean, so far, it just seems like you're pointing to circumstantial evidence. There's not really anything hard here. And we have to remember that Mark is the shortest gospel of the four. If all of these gospels were identical, you guys would complain about that. If they were all different, then you complain about them being different. So it just seems, at least from my perspective, you guys just want to complain about it, because if they were the same, you would definitely say, well, they have to be fraudulent. They have to be fraudulent. But if they're too similar, then you say they copied each other, or that they contradict each other, or whatever. So
that is, I think actually that is a fair criticism that some people definitely fall into on my side. I will grant you that is a fair criticism. I do not think that's what I have done tonight. What I've said is the stories that overlap are not independently attested. That's all I think we can say from the fact that they copied word for word. But I can also say that it points strongly away from the traditional authorship claims. I don't
Well-
think contradictions are a great argument against the Bible being reliable. So I'm with you on that.
Well, Paul, I first of all, I do respect, just the fact that our conversation, I think it's great, and I'm sorry if I am coming off a little rough or anything. I do apologize.
You're not.
with that.
You're not.
I want to treat you with respect, and
I
so I just
appreciate
want to make
that.
sure. But let me ask you
But
this:
I took
it
a.
sounds like you. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was just saying
gonna
I was
say-
going to open it to what you wanted to talk about. So please go.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I mean, it sounds like you've done quite a bit of research. I mean, what is it that holds you back? I'd really like to dive into that. Like, what is it that holds you back from saying, you know what, maybe this Bible is an accurate account of historical events? What stops you?
So I believe the burden of proof is on the person making the claim or the person making the claim, and I have yet to see in my life where testimony, even providence testimony, where we can interrogate the witnesses, where testimony alone is sufficient to establish a supernatural claim. So when there's supernatural claims in Tacitus or Josephus or the biographies of Caesar or in the Iliad or anything in an ancient history, we look at the supernatural claims and we go, I don't know if I'm taking your word for it that there was a dragon or that Caesar became a god or that they consulted ghosts to make their wartime decisions, right? Like we can accept all the, oh, well, yes, that's the name of the real city and that's the name of the real lieutenant and they actually fought this battle. And we all say, okay, fine, but did they consult ghosts about how to win the battle? Maybe not, right? Like, because it's just, so I treat ancient sources and modern sources in the same way as that if I'm going to believe something supernatural about an individual claim, then I need more than testimony. I'm not saying it's impossible to prove it to me, but your word isn't enough. So, or anyone's word. It could be the word of my mom. It could be the word of anyone, the person I trust most in the world, when they come to me and say, well, yeah, there's an invisible dragon that was causing me to be delayed. I'm like, well, okay, the person I love the most, I'm not sure I buy this invisible dragon story just because you said it. So unfortunately, when I get into the Gospels, it's not even direct testimonies. None of the Gospels claim to be that internally. None of them say, "I saw this." Right? They're at worst they're hearsay. But even if they were firsthand accounts, testimony alone doesn't get me there. So Owen may have a different answer, but I just don't give any testimony enough weight because it's far more likely that someone is mistaken or that someone is lying, right? Because we know people lie all the time. We know that people misattribute things all the time. So those are super common things that we see every single day. And so it seems, again, those are just going to always be more likely than, oh, there really was an invisible dragon there. Unless all of a sudden you can take me out and there's the footprints. But we just don't have that with the gospel or with the any of the books of the Mormon or LDS or any of the stuff, right? We just don't have the corroborating evidence to back up the testimony. And that was a long rant, and I'm very sorry, Stevie. But does that answer your question in any way? And do you have pushback for me?
No, it does. It does. So from what I heard, it sounded like it's really the claim of extraordinary supernatural claims that really stops you. So if let's just say the Bible had no supernatural claims, would you say it's credible?
I would say, I mean, if you take out all supernatural, sure, it's credible, but then it would affect my life roughly the same as Josephus's Antiquities affects my life, or that Tacitus's Annals affects my life, or none of these are books that affect my life. They just are curiosities.
Okay, so you've admitted that the Bible would be credible if not for the supernatural claims, which I understand. I mean, that's a hard thing to swallow. Let me ask you this. Let's just say the supernatural events did happen. What evidence would you need to see in order to say, you know what, maybe this is accurate?
Well, that's a great question. We have kind of a tradition here to say that I don't know what evidence it would take me to believe that God exists, but a God who wants to have a relationship with me knows, and he's not deemed it necessary to provide that as of this time. When it comes to any given miracle claim, like we have modern miracle claims all the time that aren't attested. Where's someone's amputated limb growing back? Whereas if Jesus is alive and in heaven, why isn't he coming and making a personal appearance every 10 years or something, right? Like why does Paul, the Apostle Paul, get to have a personal visit, but I have to sit here angst for a decade after several decades of being Christian without that kind of thing. God doesn't owe it to me, but he sure maybe could. These are all in the categories, right? So I don't know. God doesn't seem that anxious to demonstrate himself.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, I think the evidence is there for those that are open to it, but let me ask you this. Have you heard of the story of the rich man and the poor man that Jesus told, the parable?
Yes, but I just want to back that up. You're aware that, I mean, even though you probably wouldn't have called Owen a Christian. We both at one point in our lives believed in the supernatural and in gods and stuff, right? So we had to get dragged away from it. It wasn't that I wasn't open to it. I was dragged out of it kicking and screaming. So it wasn't a lack of being open.
Yeah, let me hit you with this parable first, and then we'll talk about that, and I'll explain like what it was that hit me over the edge. But yeah, the parable, just for those of the audience that don't know, Jesus talked about a rich man and a poor man. The rich man and the poor man both died, and the poor man went to heaven, and the rich man went to hell. And Abraham was talking to the rich man across a big chasm, and the rich man said, Abraham, please dip your finger in water and just give me, a one drop of water. And Abraham said, that's not possible. Then the old man said, please, Abraham, go back to my family, tell them about this place. I don't ever want them to come to a place this bad. And Abraham responded, he told him that you had all the prophets, you had the scriptures, that's enough. Even if we did send somebody back from the dead, your family still wouldn't believe. And I think that's where some people are.
So
in this world, all the evidence is there.
What does that gain me, do you think? So you've got a story, not even a story that's claimed to be true. You've got a guy who's expressing it as a parable, so not as a historical event, just as an analogous story, saying that what I've told you should be enough, and the people who don't think it's enough, they deserve what they get. And that's in the story that you're trying to do. If you were inventing a religion, would you not also put similar stories in there? That would say, well, this is enough evidence, and those who are that people are closed-minded, or they're, they are. I'm trying to think of what the Romans 1:19. Anyway, it doesn't matter. They wouldn't, like, how is you telling me that story that your God or the writer of that gospel said that there's enough evidence suddenly make it enough evidence?
No, I'm not saying that it does. I'm trying to tug at your heartstrings a little bit and just say that, like, there are people that are in hell right now that think the way that you think. And it's a warning, and it's to try to help you and guide you. Now, you mentioned, would another religion write something similar to that? You've heard the phrase, like, you can't shout fire in a crowded theater, like that's illegal, right? But you can if there is a fire. So this is a situation where there is a fire. We're telling you about it, and just because somebody else might put that in their book, doesn't make it.
That sounds like something true. That sounds like someone with a fake fire would say. Like, you understand that?
Yeah, no, I get
sounds
that.
identical.
I get that.
From my side, it's indistinguishable.
No, I understand, but like, if it's true, then it's true. That's my point. That's all I was.
If it's true,
now,
it's true, and that's why I pursue it, because it's super important to know. But that's why it seems so cruel that God doesn't give me more than hearsay in a book.
So like, okay, so let me ask you this: if Jesus really did come to Earth and he, you know, he became a man and all this, and these events happened 2,000 years ago, how else would you like them to let you know that happened?
Well, I mean, he's still alive, right? So he could be actively letting people know on a regular basis, so we could be making informed consent as opposed to blind consent. But that said, absolutely, if Jesus didn't, you know what, I can never come back, even though I did for Paul and for, you know, all the people, all the Catholics who are seeing me at the various apparitions and in toast and all this kind of stuff, whatever. He could have maybe appeared to someone who wasn't one of his disciples, right? He could have could have made a tour. He could have gone to China, where they wouldn't have known who this was, and they could, that would have been really cool corroboration. He could have gone to Egypt. He could have gone to various places that also could write things down. So at least we'd have something that wasn't, you know, to corroborate.
Yeah, but you have to understand, there's 8 billion people on the earth. I mean, we can't.
There wasn't then.
Appear, or he's not going to appear to every single one. But I think
Why
what's
not?
more important. Well, I'm getting there. What's more important is if Jesus, let's just say that something happens to you and Jesus appears to you in your room or something like that and talks to you. Would you then
Which I
believe
pray for
that
regularly?
True?
No, my first instinct would be, because I actually actively want that to happen, I would need to check myself a little bit for, for confirmation bias, and I would need to at least consider, because I have now researched a lot on how hallucinations work and how other things work.
Okay,
I would need to at least consider. But it'd be cool if Jesus could come and one of the things I would ask him to solve. I'd ask him for the answer to a math problem that no one has solved, or like something that I know I don't know, so that I would know I'm not hallucinating, right? So that I could go and corroborate that. I have thought this through. If Jesus appears to me, you know, I will have a few questions that he could potentially corroborate the experience for me.
Let's just say though, like what happened in the scriptures. He appeared to you and he spoke with you. He let you put his hands in the nail prints of his hands. He let you put his hands on his side. You sat down and ate a meal together, and then you saw him ascend to heaven. Would that be enough at that point for you to say, this is the truth?
Are there dishes and leftovers from the meal?
Yeah, dishes, leftover, everything. He ate with you.
Cool. So then I would consider that pretty strong. I would definitely get that DNA tested off the fork, and various things, because then it's not testimony anymore, right? Because now you've left corroborating things, and presumably when I was talking to him, I'd be able to ask some of those questions that I know I don't know the answer to, and that other humans don't. So yeah. Do you have anything like that for me?
Well, first of all, I think that's an incredibly high bar for you to set, and I think it respectfully it says a lot about basically you're basically saying nothing short of that, and even that you said you'd go get DNA tested, the fork, and I mean, basically there's no amount of evidence that you could see that it would convince you that it's true. I mean, that's basically what you're saying when you say all that. Pretty much. I mean, you're wanting
but
him
you understand
to cater to you.
You understand that I hear you, Stevie, and I'm screaming equally and saying, why are you so credulous that you don't demand that?
Because the evidence is so clear for me, and we can talk about that. But before we move to that topic, I want to talk about the evidence with you.
We do need to wrap it up. We do.
Okay. Never mind.
We at some point we will need to wrap this up because we have other calls. I have really enjoyed this conversation, but I do want to let you finish your thought. And also, I know that I want to let Owen say things if he wants to, but.
Oh no, you're good. You are. I would consider you much more informed on this subject, so it's all you on this one. But yeah, go ahead, Stevie.
I was just gonna say, God gives us free will, and if He was to appear to us, it's not. It really takes away the free will. Like if God appeared before me, I would at that point, and let's just say the whole thing. He ate
Even
with
the
me at the
demons believed
table.
him and shuddered, right? Like, so Satan has epistemic certainty that God exists, right?
Right, right. But what I'm saying is, like, if you do that, you take away people's free will because they have no
How?
choice but to believe you.
You're telling me that all the people who saw God Moses came down and with the tablets and destroyed their golden calves, and they parted the Red Sea, and they got all that stuff. The people right there, and like a month later, they were already, what has God done for us lately? Are you telling me that God took away their free will to reject him? Or that Satan and the third of his angels who left him, that God took away their free will? How does God revealing himself so that we don't have to guess take away my free will?
Well, maybe it won't take away your free will, but it will the majority of us. I mean, most people who are a little bit more open, maybe, but those people,
Why?
let's just say you didn't believe in God. Let's just say you didn't believe in God at all, and then Jesus appeared to you. You now believe in God, even if it's a different God, and you make up your own God later. That takes you from unbelief to belief, from atheist to theist. I mean, that would be stepping on free will.
And that's
Absolutely.
my complaint. I don't have informed consent. God is saying, your salvation hinges on whether or not you decide to make me Lord of your life. And I'm sitting here saying, I'd be happy to. Can you demonstrate church you're there? My problem isn't, there's not informed consent. And this weird thing about this free will, the Bible is full of people who had direct access to God, right? And they didn't ultimately. We had Judas. Judas was there to see all the miracles, and he rejected. So I don't understand this claim that if God was to actively give everyone, if God gave everyone direct evidence that he existed, so that we would know that he existed, we still would have our choice about whether to make him our Lord, right?
Maybe I should have said influence. Like God doesn't want to influence your decision.
Why?
God wants you to come to Him because He wants you to choose Him. He wants you to choose Him.
I'm happy to choose Him if you give me informed consent.
When you walk outside and you look at the sun and you look at the trees, I mean, you really believe all that came from nothing? Not that it started from nothing, but that nothing was the creating cause. You really believe that?
So, yeah, that's a whole different rabbit hole. I am comfortable in my materialism. Yes. Let's stick to the Jesus part of it, because again, me being a deist doesn't change not having enough evidence to say yes or no to Jesus. Do you think the reason that I'm not dating Jennifer Connelly right now is because Jennifer Connelly rejected me? Forget that she's happily married. Do you think is it because she rejected me, or she has no idea who I am and has no evidence that I exist? And I'm out of her league.
Probably has no idea because in that analogy, she has no idea.
So what if I had to set up a system where I became very powerful and I could punish people who didn't want to date me, and I gave the same punishment to the people who said no as the people who I never introduced myself to? That doesn't seem right.
God doesn't punish you because you don't know Him. God punishes you for the sins that you've committed.
God fails to save. I hope that's not what I said. Maybe I did actually. So God failed to save me. You're right. I did say punishment. So good catch. I'll take your point there. God failed to save me because He didn't give the offer to me. It's one thing for someone to say no. It's another for someone to not be informed. And I am in the position where I'm not informed. I want to leave it there. I think we've been going for quite a while. I did really enjoy this conversation, though, Stevie. I hope that you've got a little bit to think about. And maybe you can look up synoptic problem, and I would love to chat with you some other day about what you think, how you think that those gospels came to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the call, Paul and Owen. I really respect you guys
Yep.
both. And just to end on one thing, I would just say I'm going to say something that's unpopular, but uh, God doesn't God doesn't need you to choose Him, or God doesn't. Not everybody gets the opportunity to know God, and so He doesn't need that to happen. So
Right. So
if
then am I
you
doing it? So then I'm not doing anything wrong, right? That's I'm exactly in that position. I feel like the ball is in God's court. I seek God regularly. I have sought God most of my life, and so I am very comfortable in this world where the ball is in God's court. So if you are in agreement with me that the ball is in God's court and He may not extend to me the same opportunity He extends to others, that's not really on me. Thank you,
yeah, God has
Stevie.
to choose you. Thank you very much,
Yeah,
Paul.
perfect.
Right, right.
Um, do does in your religion as you had it, did it have any claims in there that like that if you don't believe this you're dumb, or if you don't believe this you're a fool, or that enough evidence has been provided? Like, is there passages like that in your?
Yeah, I mean Jehovah's Witnesses, they kind of go by what is it, Psalms 104 or something? The fool said in his heart there is
There
no
is no
God.
God, right?
Also, they say that you're foolish not to believe it, and you're foolish not to be a Jehovah's Witness. Aside from all of that, I just want to point out we don't know which religion is correct. Like, set aside religion, set aside like not
Mm-hmm.
knowing if Islam is correct. We don't know what denomination is correct, and some of them are mutually exclusive. If I go with the wrong one, my ass is going to die anyway. So I'm waiting for God to tell me which denomination after He reveals Himself, because I don't want to fuck that up. That would be really bad. That's my plan.
I see you atheists in the queue, and I hope you'll hold on, and hopefully we'll have time for you. But we are prioritizing the theist calls. So the next one we are going to talk to is a theist, maybe. We'll see if Tom can explain himself on that. Tom, you're maybe a theist, or
Yeah,
am I reading this incorrectly?
I'm sort of agnostic as to whether a god exists or not, but I'm pretty sure that any monotheistic god doesn't exist. I think there are paganisms which could be correct, but they're not. But I haven't figured out which one yet. Let's put it that way. So, like for monotheism, like the problem of evil, divine hiddenness, those sorts of things, basically make that very clear that it is wrong because you have a god. But paganism sort of doesn't have that problem. Like, why is there evil? Because the gods disagree. And actually, there seems to be like I have found a little bit of evidence, like to the point where I am almost, or like if I can, so like if there's a god which is basically the same between pre-Columbian America and and like Eurasia before 1492, that's pretty good evidence that that god is real, right?
Is
Can
it?
you repeat it? So you're asking if what if God showed up
If
in
a
pre-Columbian America?
if a
If a God,
god
okay,
if a god like is if there are two very similar gods in pre-Columbian America and in
right.
Eurasia, that
Oh, I see. Right.
that's probably because that god exists and also inspired multiple religions. Like if uh uh like if uh because like it can't be cultural diffusion then, because there wasn't any contact except for like the Vikings, which was far away from the areas we actually have written records and stuff for.
I think that to be convincing evidence for me, it would have to be very specific, and I would have to be able to verify that they didn't use each other as a source. And if I could verify those two things, I would look a lot closer.
Okay, because
But I don't think that it's like, I mean, I don't think it's good enough evidence on its own. I mean, there are flood stories from
Yeah.
all around the world, and some of them
yeah,
share, qualities with each other, but
yeah,
it's not evidence of anything other than like
yeah,
there were floods in certain areas, right?
yeah, yeah. But there is like the closest I've gotten is with like Perkrunos and Tlaloc or Cha'ak in uh Tlaloc or Cha'ak in Mesoamerica, and like Perkrunos, which is basically the ancestral form of Indra, Thor, and Perun in Eurasia, because you have like sort of a storm god with like an axe, or in the case of Thor, it's a hammer. In the case of Indra, it's a mace, I believe. It's the same weapon for those, though. And
Those are two very different weapons, though, right? A mace and a hammer, and of course, a god that
yeah,
is known for battle or whatever, which a lot of specific gods are, is going to have a weapon of some sort that they use. So,
yeah, yes, yes. But Cha'ak also like has an axe, which is what Perun has, and we know that, and like just from like the cognates, you like there's evidence that like just in terms of dissemination, Thor's hammer, Perun's axe, and Indra's mace, I think were like the same original weapon called, I believe that was called Meldon, and the fact that the axe version is also found in Mesoamerica, that like I personally don't think there's enough to quite confirm it, because one of the things about Perkrunos is red hair, and I cannot find iconography of Chak or Tlaloc where the hair is visible, but
I think that
it might exist.
to be convincing to me, I would have to be able to rule out the possibility that even one sailor, one boat, or one whatever did not like find their way to these areas first. But even as you've described it, it is not convincing to me at all. They all
Yeah.
have their own stories and everything. That would be a prerequisite to accepting it, though, ruling that out.
Yeah,
Wouldn't it also
I
be
haven't-
cooler if instead of like, I kind of accepted it around the world, people were kind of coming up with axes and hammers, around the same time, and we kind of largely came to the same thing. Wouldn't it be cooler if they had some weapon that like no humans were using at all, right? Like they had plasma rifles. That'd be more compelling, right? Because how did someone in China and someone in the Aztec community come up with plasma rifles for their gods?
Yeah, like I mean, I know that the Slavs, I believe, gave her in like apples, which are can work as bombs, I think, but that's kind of it. Like this is just sort of something I noticed a while ago, and yeah.
Yeah, I
Tom,
think I
what's
would
the-
want to go ahead, Paul.
All I was going to ask is, Tom, what's the best reason that Owen and I should buy into this?
Because there's not as much. Well, I mean, there's not as much evidence against it, like as much contradictory stuff as there is with like monotheism. So like relative to monotheism, it's more like because
Okay, so you're the least problematic story that I don't believe. Is that where we're going?
Sort of.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
need like a lot more for it. I'm gonna need a lot more. I'm gonna need affirmative evidence for it. The what you gave us would at best be like circumstantial, just kind of hinting at the possibility that maybe I would need some kind of affirmative evidence before I accepted any of that.
I do have one question for you. Has
Okay.
any other caller given you any sort of affirmative evidence?
Can any other caller give us affirmative evidence?
Has any other caller given you affirmative evidence for any of the stuff they've been arguing?
Nobody has given me affirmative evidence. No, I mean, nobody has given me like hard evidence. Like they came with DNA from Jesus that we can test or something. Or, it doesn't even have to be that extreme. Like they haven't given me anything that could even potentially a little bit maybe be convincing. It's all just based on feelings. I think this is true. I feel like this is true. And as with Stevie last time, or maybe it wasn't Stevie. I apologize if it wasn't Stevie. As one of the other callers did somewhere along the line, when I feel like it's true doesn't work anymore, they back into you're going to hell if you don't believe in it. Fear tactics don't really work with me, and I think it's kind of messed up. So yeah, I mean, no, I haven't gotten any affirmative evidence from anybody yet. Still waiting.
Well, yeah, that's it then.
Okay, well, yeah, I appreciate the phone call. Do you have something else to add, Paul?
I was just going to say, I'm at this point, I'm comfortable in my materialism, at least at my methodological naturalism. I'm comfortable with that, so I'm not looking for, other versions of. I'm not on a hunt for the least problematic version of theism because I just don't think it has predictive power. So,
yeah,
all right,
absolutely,
fair enough.
All right. Well, thank you,
Thank you,
Tom. But if you do come across some hard evidence, please do give us a call.
Okay. All right.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Bye. A nice person, but we can all be in the what if. Well, what if we're in a matrix, or what if we're in a simulation, or what if, there's a lot of fun thought experiments that it's fun to have, but that's not specifically the point of our show necessarily. So,
yep.
All right. I think I'm going to go with. I think this one's been waiting the longest. I think we're going to go with Logan, who's been patiently waiting. Hey, Logan.
Hey.
Hi, how's it going, Paul and Owen?
Going well.
All right. What can we help you with?
Oh, yeah. Real quick, I want to say I've been watching both of you guys, for the last 5 years or so, and you guys kind of kick-started my doubt and my introspection. And I want to thank you guys for that. I think.
Oh, that's awesome.
Appreciate it a lot.
Yeah.
All right. As the call screener wrote down, I'm an atheist, and my girlfriend is a devout Catholic, and I'm not super comfortable with talking about religion and stuff, but I also don't want to pretend either. Don't want to live a lie or anything like that.
You said she's Catholic, right?
I've done that for a while, and I don't. Yeah.
You said that she's Catholic. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm kind of familiar with both of you guys' conversion stories, especially Paul. You and your what was it, ex-wife, I believe, kind of separated because of that.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I just, it's been, that kind of stuff has been weighing on me recently,
Yeah, that makes sense. Catholicism is like you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me like Catholicism is a uniquely difficult religion to be like in a co-relationship with, because the Catholic Church actually has like a lot of control over people's lives, right? And they expect them to like sign contracts when they're trying to raise children and go to, Catholic parenting classes and everything. So yeah, I can imagine that's not easy. You want to tell us a little bit more about like the specific problems?
Devout Catholic can mean a wide array of things, right? So I know people who go to church on Easter and Christmas, and they call themselves a devout Catholic. And then there's the ones that like, well, I won't eat fish. I won't eat meat other than fish on Friday, and I won't use contraception. And there's people who take it serious, and there's other people, and it's a broad array. Where do you fall, or where does she fall in that spectrum?
It's hard to tell because I've avoided the subject like the plague, because I'm terrified of having that conversation. But from what I can tell, from like our friend groups and stuff like that, and our social circles, and where she went to school and stuff like that, Catholic private school, and like a relatively conservative, not super conservative, like go to church twice a week, and absolutely know anything before marriage type stuff. But I know it's not super helpful, but like I'd say kind of moderate Catholic, really like devoted to like Jesus and the religion, but not necessarily in a regressive way.
Okay.
Has she expressed any expectations? Sorry, I'm going to let
Owen, no.
Okay. Oh, you're good.
Owen, go.
No, I was just, I wasn't going to say anything particular. I was going to ask about the specific problems that you may have faced in the relationship. I mean, you said that she's a moderate Catholic. That could be a good sign, but yeah, I mean, what have you faced any specific problems, or are you just completely avoiding the subject 100% right now?
I am completely avoiding the subject because I don't want to scare her away, and it sucks that I have that fear,
Yeah.
that like a part of me that like is inconsequential to me could, hurt someone like that.
But also, I mean, there is if you aren't able to live your authentic self with your girlfriend, that's actually better to know sooner rather than later, right? Like, I mean, if you're in a fun stage, and then that's all great, but it's a bad time to have this conversation, after the wedding or after the engagement or after the first kid.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you're wasting each other's time because you're going to be that incompatible, even though it sucks, right? Like that sooner rather than later is the better time. Is it not? Or am I missing something?
Yeah. No, I definitely get that. And like when I quote unquote, I don't want to steal the term, but like when I quote unquote came out to my parents, I screwed up. I didn't do it properly and stuff like that. Especially with my mom, it kind of came off. It kind of came off judgment, like I was belittling. Yeah. This was forever ago now, like 2020. Yeah, that's kind of glad that's been forever. But yeah, it'd been kind of building up for several months at this point. I had gone on my own like internal journey of faith, and had come to the decision, for mostly rational reasons, that there likely isn't a God or anything like that. And I had kept that to myself for several months because I was terrified of what that would do, like, to my relationships with my family and friends and stuff like that. And I'm not.
Sometimes you gotta be yourself, right? You can't hide who you are at a certain point. It sounds like you
Yeah.
reached that point.
I did, yeah.
Well,
And it took a while because, like, I'm in rural Bible Belt, Michigan. I hardly know anybody who's not even just not religious, but like not Christian. So like
Yeah.
it was a terrible time for me in several ways. Like I didn't want to lose that much more of my social life.
Yeah. And it makes sense you would fear of losing your girlfriend too, but I definitely think Paul's right. Sooner rather than later. Sooner the better, right?
So let me give you a bit of a weasel strategy that I often use, and I'm calling it a weasel strategy only because it doesn't go straight to the heart of the question, which is maybe the most fair way to do it. But we're all chicken. None of us wanted, when it comes to our partners. We don't always want to go straight at it. So here's what I have done in the past, though not with romantic partners. If I'm uncertain of how it's going to go, if the person finds out my actual beliefs, what I start with are peripheral things that are adjacent, but that are not generally deal breakers. So you can ask questions like, do you think there are angels? Do you think there's and just, in casual conversation, do you think there's hell?
Yeah.
Do you think the earth is old or young? Like some of these questions, like, that are not faith threatening, right? But what you can get is the temperature. You can get the temperature from which they're gonna, if you're even posing the question, is there hell or not? If that is met with fury and wrath, that's going to be part of your answer of how this is going to go. If that's going to be met with, I don't know, maybe there's hell, maybe there's like, that, you might get a bit different answer of, well, this Catholicism isn't necessarily a core part of her actual thoughts and being. It's more of a cultural association thing, right? Because it can be the case.
Thing.
Or a social thing.
Yeah.
If you ask these questions around the edges with no pressure, with no pushback, no matter what answer she gives, you kind of roll with that. No, that's interesting. I learned something about you. Cool. You can feel out how anxious you need to be about the eventual bigger reveal. Does that make any sense?
Okay. Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense.
Because sometimes there doesn't need to be the big reveal. You and I both made the same mistake. You sound like you and are identical in how we made mistakes about coming out to our families.
Yeah.
But this might not be a deal breaker either way from either of you, potentially. There are versions of Catholicism that you can probably live with.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, or even like, hey, would you raise your kids in the same Catholicism that you were, right? Which is even like, you can ask those kind of very innocuous questions.
Yeah.
That don't threaten, that don't make you take a stand, but lets you brace yourself for the day and maybe put off the day.
Yeah.
Is that a good treading water strategy for you?
I think it can be, absolutely. And like, I'm sorry, like, I know it's not a super interesting question for you guys, like, doesn't exactly spark a whole lot of conversation, but I'm glad that you guys took my call, because I think, like, no, I'm not the only one who, like, is in a similar situation. And
yeah, absolutely. No, it was an interesting question. It's an interesting subject. It's something that a lot of people struggle with. So I appreciate you calling in with it.
The only thing I would add, though, is unlike a family, like where you're trying to save that relationship, so you're trying to avoid, you're sometimes the cost of avoiding your true self is okay for relationships that are super important. You want to keep in the long term. I do think that a romantic partner, ultimately, if that's not a meeting of the minds, that's just not going to work. And so
Yeah.
you can't let that fester, or I would advise you not let that fester forever, because romantic partners, there's meant to be some compatibility and simpatico there that is, and it's an optional relationship, but it's also your most important one. So don't. I think if the opposite was true, if you found out that she was secretly Catholic and wasn't telling you, and this drug on for months or years, and then she sprung it on you later that she was secretly Catholic and it was super important to her, you might feel a certain kind of way about that, right?
Yeah, I'd feel hurt that she couldn't tell me that she felt she couldn't tell me that.
Yeah. So
I wouldn't.
again,
I wouldn't be judgmental, but I would definitely. Yeah.
As you mentioned up front, my unequally yoked relationship didn't go well, so I'm nothing but a cautionary tale. But I put myself out.
I didn't mean to like bring that up out of the blue. I just
no, that's all.
Talked about it on several of your videos and stuff like that.
I'm happy to be a cautionary tale. That is what I do. Don't be like me. All right, Logan. Anything else? Any other last thoughts?
Not really. I just want to say, I love both you guys' YouTube channels, Paulogia and Telltale Atheists, right?
Telltale,
or
yeah.
Did you change it up recently?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Like I've been, watching you guys since 2020, early 2020, pre-COVID 2020.
I appreciate that.
And
That's crazy.
I want to thank you guys for all you guys have done, and like helped me through some difficult times.
You're
Absolutely.
very welcome, Logan. It was great. And again, if you have updates in a few months, and if you tried some things and it worked or didn't work, and even if we're not the hosts, then call in and let people know, because our advice from this side is not necessarily universally great, or it might be good. So let us know. Thanks, Logan.
Well,
have a good night.
Thank you very much. Have a good night. You too.
Bye. All right. Well, we are still have room for theist callers. If you are a theist caller and are looking to call in, we still have availability for you. In the meantime, we will talk to Grayson. Push the right button. Grayson, wanting to know, why do you think? Yeah, you know what? I will let you tell us why you're calling. I don't need to read the notes. Welcome.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes, so I was just curious to learn more about the early, the other Messiah figures in Jewish culture during Jesus' time, and kind of your thoughts and scholarly thoughts on, aside from yours, on why Jesus' story stuck around and the others kind of petered out. I know just on a base level that like when Christianity became like a major religion in the Roman Empire, and then like later on in history, kind of how that spread. But I am curious what kind of those early years were like, and why, or what your thoughts are on why Jesus' story became so prevalent among the other kind of messianic figures.
So I definitely have thoughts, but Owen, I'll let you go first if you have them.
No, I was gonna say you're probably better suited to the question. I'm not actually. I have a few guesses, but maybe educated guesses. But yeah, what do you think?
Well, so you're right to say that there were definitely messianic movements all over the place in first century, Palestine area before the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, and you're not wrong to at least infer. We have the Egyptian, we have others that they were raising, according to Josephus at least, sometimes on the order of 10 or 20,000 men, even, who were trying to do political coups, right? Who were trying to do what the Davidic Messiah was supposed to be, and that is overthrow the Romans. Personally, my hypothesis of what happened there is similar to what happened to lots of different different religions when their prophecies fail, right? When so here you are, you're one of Jesus's followers, and you think he's going to be the Messiah, and he's going to overthrow Rome for you, and you know, set up this kingdom of heaven. But that doesn't happen, right? So you've invested at least 3 years of your lives, and when that doesn't happen, you can do one of several things. You can straight up leave. You can say, "Well, I'm going to go follow now, you know, the next Messiah down the block." But one thing that we know does happen, and I'm just wanting to pull up my examples here. So we have, for example, the Millerites in the 1800s, where you know they had they'd made very strong predictions about that in March 1844, that you know that's when Jesus was going to come back, and then when that didn't happen, that was the great disappointment, and a lot of people left that church. But at one point there was a young girl named Ellen who spoke up at church and said, well, you know what if Jesus did really come that day, but it was a spiritual coming. So we weren't wrong. We were just wrong about how it would look. And a couple other people bought into that. And that is now the Seventh-day Adventist denomination with millions of followers, right? That all came from this one young girl who said, hey, let's just reinterpret what happened there when what we wanted didn't happen. I'm trying to think of the other. So there's the, and I don't know, I think I'm pronouncing this right, but there's the Lubavitcher movement that happened in the 1990s. In fact, there was, it was a Jewish group that thought that their leader was the Messiah. When he passed away in 1994, again, not some people left, but a lot of them stayed. And this is actually still, this movement has actually increased. They have something like 25,000 people who have joined since the person who said there was a Messiah had died, because again they reframed it about what the mission was going to be. We have other examples in spiritual movements and other things that basically, one of the things that can happen is people reframe what the mission is. And I think that's largely what happened. I think it was prompted probably by Peter or someone having at least some kind of hallucination or something, some kind of experience that led them to say, well, maybe Jesus isn't dead after all. Maybe it's a spiritual thing. A lot of scholars will say that early Christianity, the evidence seems to point to that the version that Paul converted to was a spiritual resurrection as opposed to a physical resurrection. The empty tomb, the touching my side, those are all very, very late additions. That basically, if you had this group that was reframing themselves as the kingdom of God isn't where we live now, but the kingdom of God is a future thing. That is a reframing that can survive. The question that I always get pushback here is, but those all didn't blow up and change the world. Well, no, because not all religions survive. But when you're looking at what is that initial spark, what is that initial change, over and over again in religious history, you see these reframing events when there's a failure of the initial mission. So I don't think it's a spectacular claim at all to imagine that there was a core of that first Jesus movement that was basically reframing things. I have more to say, but does that make sense to you at all?
Yes, it does. It honestly leads to more questions, but that makes sense.
Okay, well, let's go to your questions instead of where I was arbitrarily going to go. What kind of call-up questions do you have?
So this isn't entirely related, but it does make me wonder, like, okay, so if the movement for this to continue on and become a bigger thing was probably led by the people who were left around afterward, I have kind of a two-folded question. The first one is, what do we think, just through reading everything and through knowing about their lives, what do we think their motivations were, since they weren't like a group that was like trying to physically overtake the Roman Empire or physically, like, through force or violence, like, make changes. I'm just curious to know what, like, and currently my brain is trying to say that this is just from, like, old apologetics weird things, but I genuinely, like, in a just, like, human sense, I'm curious to know what their motivations
Sure.
would have been.
So let me just get my thoughts there and we can continue on with more questions. So one of the things that we all learned in our apologetics was that there was 12 disciples, plus women, plus all these people who were all out preaching and putting their lives in danger for this message, right? But unfortunately, history doesn't bear that out. And that's one of the great things I push back on most in what I do. And I've debated Sean McDowell, who wrote a great book on the definitive book on like the fate of the apostles and that kind of thing. When you push them really hard, they will admit that, okay, there's 3 martyrs. There's Paul, there's Peter, and there's James' brother Jesus. Those are the 3 solid martyrs, right? Okay, so if Peter was the first person to have the vision, it makes sense that he's willing to go to his death for this because he's the one guy who had the vision. Paul, we know, had a later vision, at least 3 years later, maybe 6 years later. And he already categorizes his thing. He already expresses in his letters, was I in the body or out of the body? I don't even know, right? Like forget the weird way Acts depicts it. If you read Paul's letters, he treats it all like a big spiritual experience. And if you force Christians to say, well, did Jesus actually come back to earth to visit Paul? Then it's like, well, okay, so we're waiting for the third coming instead of the second coming. You know, like everyone kind of acknowledges Paul's thing was in his head. Even in the stories, right, he was seeing things and hearing things that other people weren't. So in his head in some way. So that's those 2 guys. The one guy that is most interesting in my view, and people can cut me off if it's not as interesting as I think it is James, the brother of Jesus. Catholics don't think that he's the biological brother, but that's not important at the moment. James, the brother of Jesus, is interesting because we don't need to rely on the Bible to know we don't need to rely on the Gospels and other things to know what he was up to. Other historians write about him and his death. And in those, he is called James the Just. And when he was killed, according to Josephus, a Jewish historian, when James the Just was killed in what was a political coup, every Jew, Christian or not, was sad about it. Right? That's in secular history, that everyone was sad that James the Just had been killed. And then we look at Paul's letters, the couple times where he talks about where he met James. James was having a fight with Paul because he thought everyone needed to be circumcised, and that if there were any of these non-Jewish Christians, they needed to eat at different tables. And in fact, he sent spies to find out who was eating with who in the lunchroom. Like this was the level of what we know about James, the brother of Jesus, from what I consider to be reliable sources. So the question is, in general, what was his point? It sure seems like his point was, my brother's mission was really just Judaism. And my point here is I am here. Everyone writes that he is the figure that ironed out differences between Judaism and Rome. And it sure seems like this man, who everyone was, so they brother, the whole square, all of Jerusalem wanted him killed and was happy about it. A few years later, his brother dies and everyone's sad. That can't be the same mission, right? Like James, the brother of Jesus, was clearly basically pitching a Rome-friendly version of Judaism. In my research, that's kind of where I land. And so those are the 3 big guys that you got. And that's, to me, that's a pretty easy to explain in this reframing framework. I'm going to pause there because I know I get on these tangents. Does that make sense? And did that answer your question?
Yes, that makes sense and answers my question. I think there was a part of me that was trying to understand it from a political point of view and not from the fact that, these people genuinely still believed in what this figure had to say after his death and wanted to continue on that mission out of their own kind of genuine belief in it, rather than for like political motives, or I don't know.
Well,
For
like
some reason, I
imagine
wasn't looking at it from that angle.
imagine you were Jesus' sister, and Jesus was killed in the most public possible way, and the whole town voted him to die. But you have to still live in the region. What is your goal going to be? Are you going to hide and just be in shame constantly because your brother was given the ultimate shame? Or might it make sense that because you just have to live there, that you might do the little things you can do to maybe rehabilitate your family's reputation?
Right. Or even just change the reputation of your brother post-mortem.
Exactly. So when people point at me, well, James's brother didn't even believe in his lifetime. I'm like, yeah, but he had very good pragmatic reasons afterwards, because this was an honor shame culture. When one member of the family shamed, everyone's to be shamed. He had incredibly pragmatic reasons to do what he could to rehabilitate that. And it seemed like he found a niche in convincing basically the Romans and everyone that, don't worry, Christianity is basically Judaism. Don't worry, because you're cool with this, so we're just a minor flavor of that. I think people could definitely call in and fight me on this, but if we look at the reliable sources, that's all I think we can say about the guy. So, what other questions did you have, if any, about Paul's weird theories about Christianity?
So, I believe I've called in on, or not called in, excuse me, but I believe I've listened on other shows where some hosts, their reading of the Bible is that Jesus himself, like, we don't truly know if he ever claimed to be God, which I agree with because there's no writing attributed directly to him. But I was curious, do you think that, I mean, I guess you can't know this, but do you think that he intended to become that kind of a figure? I guess there's no way we can know.
So, that's a great question. I do. So again, I like to take the Gospels out of it, right? Because the Gospels, that's written so many decades later, we don't know, but we can connect the dots from what we don't have to rely on the Gospels for. So we have this figure called John the Baptist, whom you probably have heard of because he's in the Bible. But John the Baptist, we don't know of him only from the Bible. We know of him as one of these other messianic figures who is doing things. And what we know is that John the Baptist had a very apocalyptic message. Now, apocalyptic is a weird word. No one is an apocalyptic preacher now. That's not a thing that we describe, but that was a job back then. And basically it was, you repent because the kingdom of God is coming, right? It's one of these, like, within our lifetimes, God's going to fix all this stuff, so get your stuff ready. So that was John the Baptist's mission. We can verify that without the Bible. We can also acknowledge that Christianity exists, and the first books that Christianity decided to write down were also apocalyptic. If you look at Mark, the first written gospel, his message almost all the time is repent, the kingdom of God is near. That's one of the first things he says. In fact, Mark starts the story, with Jesus and John the Baptist being buddies, right? So these are buddies. So it would be weird if John the Baptist was an apocalyptic preacher. The first people in Jesus' movement were apocalyptic preachers, but Jesus wasn't, right? Like, wouldn't it be weird if the start and the end were both apocalyptic preachers, but Jesus wasn't? That would be more weird than if he was. So I am personally comfortable, even though I can reject everything the gospel said, and saying, yeah, he probably was an apocalyptic preacher of some flavor. His probably main talking point was this imminent return of the kingdom of God, which would have resonated incredibly well with first century Jews who were under Roman oppression, right? Like, that would have been a great message to hear. You'd have been all about that. So that's what I think we can know about what Jesus preached. This is not a new idea. This is basically for the last 150 years of what they call the historical quest for Jesus has been kind of, that's the one thing everyone nods and says, yeah, Jesus was an apocalyptic preacher. So he probably wasn't just a carpenter. He probably wasn't just this. So does that mean that he thought he was God? Tough to say. I would say probably not. But does it mean he was putting himself in positions to poke at both Jewish and Roman authorities? Probably, yeah, because that was what the apocalyptic preachers were doing. In fact, that's when you ask that question about like all the other apocalyptic preachers, all the other messianic movements, that's what they were doing too. So if Jesus was a Me Too version of all those, he was probably sticking his nose where people didn't want it to be. I can believe that, if that's the question.
Yes. Cool. Well,
Does that reasoning make sense to you?
Yes. I personally feel so distant from. I haven't done a lot of my own research into the history of the church from a secular perspective. So I'm always curious to hear the perspectives of people who have. And I would love to continue learning those things. To me, it all feels so far away that I'm not fully able to grasp, like, for example, how many historical texts do we need to have referencing certain apocalyptic preachers, or like John the Baptist, for instance, like you mentioned, to verify like specific details of their life and what their motivations can be. Like, to me, some of it feels like speculation, which again just comes from a place of ignorance because I'm not educated on that at this moment. But it does feel very far away and fantastical to me. So it's helpful to learn from someone who is a little bit more like well-read on that.
Weirdly obsessed. Yes, that's. But I think if you ever get a chance, if you're ever at a party and you run into someone who's a historian, a fun thing to do is like have them tell you what they think the most certain things in history are. Like, they don't have to be done with Bible story, just anything. If they're the Troy or the history of India or the history of anything, they will use words like, oh yeah, we're definitely sure of X, we're definitely sure Caesar crossed the Rubicon, definitely sure of this. But then you say, well, what's the percentage on it of these highest things? Oh, it's like 60. Historians are like, because they use these words like certainty, they throw them around in their field because they don't understand that the rest of us looking thinks that historical certainty means like 99%. And they're like, nah, I mean, yeah, we don't know. Like, these are histories written by the victors, like we all acknowledge, like and they're all written to push an agenda. Like, it doesn't matter what the historical book is. So I think sometimes those of us who are looking for the, like, what would the video camera capture if we were there, is a standard that historians aren't even thinking about.
Right. Kind of like your best guess, perhaps.
Yeah, but also, like, if you found out tomorrow that Caesar definitely did not cross the Rubicon, does that change any of your plans for the weekend? It's like, no, it doesn't, right? Like, it's a curiosity, whatever. And so, yeah, did Nero set the fire that he blamed on the Christians? We don't know, but maybe, and so we just live with it. That is the frustrating part for those of us who would like to. I wish that we just could send the video cameras back and record and know what happened, but it's frustration.
Back to the future moment.
Exactly. Any other thoughts, Grayson?
I don't think so, but thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate you giving me a chance to say weird things about things I'm excited about.
Oh, I love it.
All right. Thanks. Good night.
Thanks. Y'all have a good night.
You too.
All right. Well, we have a theist in the wait. Wes is a theist
Hello?
from Georgia. Wes, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yes.
Excellent. And a great show. Thank you very much for doing this. And I had something just kind of fun, maybe for Owen. Owen mentioned wanting to hear something about science in the Bible, or I wish that God, maybe, I think it was Owen that said, I wish
Make
that,
him a Christian.
Yeah, yeah. So science in the Bible, right? So how do we find something? Is there something in the Bible that is subtly in there that could prove that they couldn't have put this in there on their own, right?
Right, like
To have
laser
kind of
beams, laser beam
yes,
type of deal, right? Yeah. Okay.
yes. So this is a way to see if a miracle is a real account or not in the Bible. This is a
Oh,
little
All right.
this is a little wild. This is just an idea that I had reading through this. I have listened to y'all for a long time, and it's made me really, kind of challenge a lot of things. And so I thought about this specifically reading through it. So what I'm thinking is you would need something in the Bible that obviously wasn't put in there as an apologetic, right? Something that
Right.
wasn't put in there to trying to prove that this miracle was true. So you'd need it in there kind of not on purpose. This is something that was just obviously a detail of the story that the writer wrote in and wasn't trying to prove anything, by putting this in there. And also
Okay.
maybe something that the writer didn't even know was medically true about this miracle. That
Okay.
would be that'd be a really interesting thing. So
It would be,
my
it would be pretty convincing, but there are a lot of things in history that we see, like things that look like astronauts in hieroglyphics that we just don't really, we don't jump to conclusions for this stuff because we don't understand the context about what it meant and things like that. So it would be a little bit convincing. I mean, it would add to it. If we had some kind of it's an anachronism, I believe is what you're referring to, right?
yeah, yeah. And I think I agree. I would never expect anyone to be convinced by, completely by what I'm about to say, but just it's intriguing at least, and it's interesting, something I want to, put across your plate. So the
Okay.
story of Mark chapter 8. Mark chapter 8, there's a very strange story where it takes Jesus 2 attempts
is this the naked
to
guy?
heal. No, it's the blind man. It's the blind man.
Oh, all right. Fair enough.
So
Carry on.
he's first healed. That is, Jesus heals his eyes, and then Jesus says to him, "What do you see?" And he says, "I see men as trees." In King James. Other versions say, "I see the form of men." And then Jesus touches him again, and he's able to see the men clearly. Now, we have only in the last 100 years, since we've had surgeries to heal people's blindness, realized that healing blindness is a two-stage act. You have to heal the optical side first, but then it takes sometimes days or weeks for the brain to be able to process the image that it's getting. It's called visual agnosia. So we know now that the brain, that we see things not just with our eyes but also with our brain, and if our brain is not used to receiving images for a while, it will kind of go dull and takes a while for those images to come in before it actually sharpens them up.
Yeah, I see what you're saying with that. However, it seems to me that Jesus could just heal the eyes just like instantly. Why did he have to go through a process that human beings would have to go through? Like doing like a 2-stage type of process or whatever. Also,
Well, if he was trying to prove to you thousands of years later that it actually happened, that's a pretty darn good way to do it. We just kind of laid out the criteria for it.
I'll tell you what would have been convincing if Jesus took a knife and some, and cut and did the surgery like on the spot, and it was like a marvel that nobody understood or had ever seen before or whatever. That would be pretty interesting to me. But little things like an astronaut in hieroglyphics or what looks like it, or like, some kind of this could easily be explained as a coincidence. So it wouldn't have to be a coincidence. Like if prophecy were going to convince me, for example, it wouldn't have to be like the prophet is prophesying that Trump is going to win the election, because that's basically a coin flip. It's 50-50 or 60-40 or whatever, right? It would have to be like he writes something on a piece of paper that's extremely detailed about some event that's going to happen 5 years in the future. Talks about the day and the time very specifically and the people that'll be there and where it is. And he seals it in an envelope and gives it to me. And in 5 years, I open the envelope and there it is. It plays out in front of me. That would be prophecy. But taking a shot in the dark, taking a guess, that's not prophecy. Jesus trying to heal his eyes once and then trying a second time to heal his eyes, that's not an anachronism as far as I can tell. That's just a coincidence at best.
Well, Wes, have you ever been blindfolded?
Coincidence.
Wes, have you ever been blindfolded?
Yeah.
Did you not experience, if you're blindfolded for any length of time, did you not experience a roughly similar effect where your eyes takes a minute to readjust to the light?
Do you think that they knew that it would require a second healing because of that? You're saying they think that they
no? I'm
they
saying
known
that this
would be the case.
I'm saying they would have all had this phenomenon of, and they're imagining blind people, right? And they would all have this experience of when I wake up groggy, not everything's clear right away. They would have, like, this is
you don't need to be healed a second time in order to have your vision, kind of come into.
No, but if you're. But if you are trying to create a story that has the artifice of being true, you want to relate, right? It's called verisimilitude. You want to create little details in there that the people who are listening to the story can connect to. And so, this idea that, that perhaps this blindness, the first effect was that it took a while for my eyes to adjust to what's happening here, to me doesn't seem so much like science as verisimilitude details. Do you understand why someone like me might have that perspective, or am I just way off?
I think it's a little. So from my perspective, you've got a writer who is putting this detail in. I don't see this thing, I don't see where this feeling of blind people probably have to, come out of their grogginess in order to see as a reason to put a whole other section of this in where he's asking what he sees, and he says, I see men as trees, and he puts his hands on them again, and he says, what do you see now? And he says, I see him clearly. I mean, there's clearly like a two-phase thing that's happening. It's more than just like a waking up kind of a thing. There's two parts and that need to be healed. His eyes need to be healed, and his processing of that information needs to be healed as well.
I mean, Owen's original objection is like, that's actually that's a weird thing that Jesus wouldn't just do it all at once. And your answer is a reasonable one. Well, I'm trying to prove to future generations that I understand science.
You asked for lasers, and they wouldn't have understood lasers, but we do, right?
Well, but that actually would have been like, if Jesus had done this via science, then I feel like you had a point. But this is you're admitting, right? This is not a scientific endeavor.
You would have just said that he was. Yeah, but if you had done it via science, you would have said, well, he was obviously very advanced medically. It doesn't mean he was God.
Yeah,
he just did it the same way we do these days.
If the dude pulled out a scalpel and started cutting into his eye, or a knife or whatever, and actually repaired his eyes through science, that would be pretty convincing. I mean, I'd want to check and make sure that it wasn't like aliens coming around and fucking with us or something, but that would be like very, very convincing to me if he did it with science. I mean, miracles can be faked or cannot happen at all, and people make this shit up, but something that is anachronistic to that degree that could not have been put in after the fact or whatever is very convincing. That is not what we have here. This is coincidence at best.
Oh man. All right. Well, that's fine. I thought it was interesting at least.
It is
I mean, I'm not saying
interesting,
I'm not saying it's not interesting. Yeah, I'm just saying that this doesn't rise me to the level of, well, this is something that no one could have ever even dreamed or imagined how a blind person would be healed. It's like, nah, this seems like very much within the margin of error of how someone might at least come up with the story. And Owen's point was great. Like if even if they had written that Jesus cured him by sticking knives in certain, like in the corners and certain points, I'm like, well, that's not how they treated that then. So that was somebody knowing something. I think I agree that would have even, if the point was for Jesus to teach science much later on.
If AI tells us in a few years how to cure blindness with dirt, will that help?
No, I'm sorry, that wouldn't help. If AI
then Jesus was very advanced science.
If AI taught us how to cure blindness with dirt, I mean, if AI revealed to us that we could pick up a handful of dirt and rub it in people's eyes and actually cure their blindness, maybe I would think about it.
With some kind of twist. There's going to be some kind of twist there, but
why would there be a twist? It seems like if this were real, there wouldn't have to be a twist, right?
Well, if it's, I mean, do you want it to be scientific or do you want it to be supernatural? Because it sounds like I've got to try to make it both.
Well, if I'll take supernatural if it's 100% verifiable, the way that like a prophecy would be, as I described. You know, somebody writes it down, puts it in an envelope, and gives it to me. 5 years later, I open it, and it's identical to what they said. This exact situation, and there's absolutely no way around it. That's supernatural, and I'll take that. I'll take whatever. I just need to verify it. Is all. I need something, anything.
And if you want, like, and if the thing is, like, so the miracles of Jesus, I think you would very much strip the meaning from them if we were all to discover that they were based, on they were basically science tricks. You would remove the magic of it. But I think there's lots of ways for the Bible to, if it wanted to put in science for future generations, that it could do so clearly. But instead we get vague things like, well, stretching the heavens, that's the same as the universe expanding. Meanwhile, we have Jesus telling people, don't wash your hands. That's his advice to people. Don't wash your hands. Forget germ theory. Like, that doesn't sound like someone who understands germ theory. You get, if I have the goats breed in front of vertical slat fence, then their children have vertical stripes, right? Like, these are the
Bible actually is against that. The Bible actually has that's what people thought back then, but the Bible actually, that's another good point. Do you want to look at that one? That's in Genesis.
No,
right?
I mean, where he was like stealing his master's crops or herd, because he said all the striped ones are going to be mine.
Jacob and Laban.
Yeah, and then literally the way he makes that happen is he has them copulate by, near vertically striped things.
Yeah, no, see, that's actually a good point, a good plus for science. In that passage, can I show it to you real quick? It's an interesting one.
No, are you going to tell me like weird that like the hyssop leaves got into the water and that is
no.
Okay, because I have heard that.
No.
Tell me what you're going to tell me, so I'm not guessing.
Okay. Well, in Genesis 31, in Genesis 30, he does that trick where he's trying to get them to breed by putting the thing in there, and then in Genesis 31, I'm looking for the verse here, and it says. Here. Anyway, I'm looking for a verse, maybe someone in the chat or something can put in there, where it says that, here it is, 31:12. It says, the
Genesis
angel of
31.
God spake unto me in a dream. Yep. 11 and 12, Genesis 31, 11 and 12. The angel of God spake unto him in a dream, saying, Jacob, he said, here am I. So Jacob is dreaming after the fact. And God says, lift up now thine eyes and see, all the rams which leap upon the cattle are ringed straight, speckled and grizzled. For I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. So what he's saying is, you have tried your cockamamie, homegrown way of getting this done, but I did this the genetic way in verse 12. I had the ones that you wanted, I had them breeding with each other on your behalf. So, yeah, you just have to read one more chapter and you see that it wasn't what Jacob did that did it. It was what God was doing behind the scenes in spite of Jacob's work. It kind of shows that.
I will allow you that interpretation because I do think that is a reasonable interpretation. It's not the only one. Do you think that the blood of doves cures diseases?
I've not heard that.
Do you think that Jesus was wise to tell people to not wash their hands?
Was that? What are you referring to? What are you? Don't
Jesus
wash
was
them
being
at all,
criticized for.
like from a
He
germ
was just not
theory?
washing his.
Because
Go ahead.
In the Old Testament, I mean, I could tell you that in the Old Testament they specifically told them to wash their hands and to do it in running water.
I know,
So
and that's why.
there is
But they were criticizing Jesus' disciples for not doing that, and he's like, none of that applies to me. Me and my disciples do what we want. We don't need to do that stuff.
Right.
Where literally, like, you're right. In the Old Testament, using running water was the good advice given germ theory, but Jesus is and people have, as people will always take the Bible, whether they're using it in context or not, opened it up to like, I'm not getting vaccinated. I'm not doing certain things because the Bible doesn't want me to take precautions about my own health. I'm supposed to leave it just to Jesus. I'm just if I wanted
interpretation of that move.
I understand, but you could, if I was the God of the universe and all powerful, all knowing, I could make some of these points without causing some of those problematic side effects, right?
Or give us something more obvious, anything like a little bit more obvious that could not be coincidence.
Or something generally known or generally misunderstood or, whatever.
Yeah. I don't think we're getting, I mean, I think the Bible is clear that we're not getting some type of definitive proof. I mean, I think when we ask for proof, we're explicitly going against.
Well, I agree with you, and that's why I don't think we on the show typically don't typically, try and push this point. It's only if someone calls in saying the Bible has science in it. That's when that's the only time we bring this up. So,
touche. Yeah. What do you think about the idea that from like common agreement and common consent, like you've got, I know that God has never given you something, or hasn't, since you've been atheist, given you something, but that God has given enough evidence to 90% of the world's population. Does that not give you pause just to say, all of these people have some type of intuition for God? And I know the reasons are terrible because there's no good reason. It's some type of an intuition. I think we latch on to reasons after, like bad reasons, after we have the intuition for God. But like, how do you shake off, like, everybody around you has this intuition for God? Do you chalk it all up to just propaganda and the way they were raised?
Owen, you want to go first?
Yeah, I will. I think that there is a very obvious evolutionary explanation for this, and the evolutionary explanation is if you are a creature that's being hunted, a prey animal, and you think that you hear the wind in a bush, so you bolt, you live to see another day. and whether there was a creature in the bush coming to get you or not. But if you hear the wind in a bush and think that it's not really there and it is, then you're eaten. We are predisposed to assume there's something there outside of us watching and, I don't know, controlling or whatever. We're predisposed to believe that because of the way that we kind of evolved as human beings through natural selection and stuff. So it's not
You think that we
surprising to me.
I'm
Say again?
sorry, I shouldn't have cut you off. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
You're good. Okay, there's a little bit of a lag, though. You're fine. I was gonna say there is a predisposition to believe this. It does not mean that there is a God, and also, it's not even like a predisposition to believe in God. It's a predisposition to think that there's something there. I mean, that can mean like thousands of gods, Hindu style, or any number of
Yeah.
different things. So, yeah.
Also, the afterlife, not just a present, but a burial of the dead with their stuff from the earliest graves that we have.
Actually, a kind of an understanding for that also for a belief in an afterlife, which is when your brain is kind of shutting down at the end, it releases a bunch of chemicals that make you just kind of content with the situation and okay with it. And, people who have died and come back, because their heart stopped or whatever and their brain activity was gone, and then they came back, reported things like seeing a light, like a bright light, and then it just kind of went out, and just complete contentedness. So, that kind of stuff is just a scientific fact that exists and is well understood scientifically and not a surprise to anybody. So that's
I could see that for today, but before they
go ahead.
Before they had developed language, they were burying their dead and had like thoughts of afterlife.
Burying them, there were rituals, but they didn't all believe.
No one could have come back, and that couldn't have started from NDEs. I mean, that was like
Wes, you agree that you agree that belief in afterlife is a subset of theism, though, right? Like that it's not like afterlife you're talking about is a smaller number than the number of people who believe in supernatural.
That's true. Yep.
I think that's where Owen was going with this. Was that?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You're getting into smaller circles now. The ubiquity of God belief doesn't really translate to the ubiquity of afterlife belief.
Right.
I think I guess you're right. You'd have to make it kind of the way that I'm thinking about it is a large net. It's metaphysical in general. It's just extremely common. It's a metaphysical understanding.
If you're a Neanderthal who's capable of, making flower arrangements and shovels to bury your dead and things like that, do you suspect that they were afraid of dying?
Yes. Yeah.
If you are afraid of something that you can't control, is not a good coping mechanism to come up with scenarios where that's not as big a deal.
Sure. Yeah. That's reasonable.
Like, so to me, this explanations and understandings for like all of this stuff, none of it is like none of it can be routed back to miracle. And a lot of people try to say that it, some of the stuff does route back to miracle, but it's the classic God of the gaps. God is going to continue getting smaller and smaller until we explain this stuff away.
Yeah, I absolutely see that. It really bothers me. The God of the gaps really bothers me that we've gone to like the fine tuning argument is a great example of that. It's just it's not good. I've definitely torn apart a lot of things that I've believed here as I've kind of been digging into this a little bit more. So yeah, that's interesting. It's a very I mean, I can see it evolutionarily. I can see how it could make sense like that, but it's just and there's just a very, very huge weight of first of all, my own personal experience, my own personal intuition, not like I saw Jesus in the driveway, but like my own personal intuition. I have a very hard time shaking intuition that there is a God, and I had
a kind of revival myself. I had not a revival, but I had an awakening, a religious awakening moment where I believed, like with everything in my heart, that this was real. But it just kind of, you come to realize that it really was just chemicals in the brain, and there's no reason to believe any of this. And people from all different backgrounds and cultures and societies have types of experiences where they, I guess, report spiritual awakenings or whatever.
Yeah. I've taken a bunch of time. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Wes.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the good call and for the conversation. Appreciate it. Call again sometime.
Yeah. Have a good night.
All right. And all right. I'm not seeing a note from our producer other than to see that the call-in studio has closed down. So I believe that is the end of our show. I need to thank, I believe Stephanie was this call screener tonight, if I remember correctly. And Arden is our producer extraordinaire once again. So thank you to those. Thank you to our mods who always do an amazing job, and I'm sure they did again tonight. Thank you to our audience, both theists and non-theists, for being polite and lively in the chat. Thank you, Owen, for hanging out with me. Now I want to do this again with you. That was a fun time.
Yeah,
cool.
100%.
All right, be kind to each other, everybody, and support the line on Patreon or something. I don't know what else we're supposed to do.
No, that works.